Hello, fellow Thunder Wizards. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about operating from the soul. As you know, this is a key teaching of mine. And let us go over again very briefly what the concept is behind this, which I have found through my experience in my life that this is the key to not only fulfillment and happiness, but also success and prosperity. And that we start from the assumption that the soul comes into manifestation, into incarnation, with a pre-programmed desire. Now we would call it, your orlog, your fate, your dharma, your destiny, which, brings a sense of responsibility. And that's true. You're operating from your soul desire is how you best fulfill your responsibility to the universe. Now, unlike some modern religions that have that destiny combined with guilt and, you have to go out and make a martyr of yourself in order to, be a good person or what have you. My experience is that that's not how the soul operates. The soul operates from joy. And the natural state of the soul is joy. So to be operating from the soul doesn't mean that you yourself have to always feel this giddy, idiotic, blissful joy. Although if you do, that's great. That's certainly a possibility. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the way that you know that you are following your path is that either when you think about it, when you first think about it, it gives you a sense of joy, gives you a sense of excitement and hope. And or when you're following your joy, you see in your life what looks like synchronicity, that everything is synchronizing to you and people are showing up and things are happening for your benefit in these magical ways. Those are two of the main ways that you know. But the idea is that nature operates from positive feedback. So, one good example is the desire to procreate. It's got to be the funnest thing there is, from a physical standpoint, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I mean, there's just nothing more fun than that. That's just such a totally, completely pleasurable thing. Well, that is that way because the priority for the physical life form, and goes for all life forms, is procreation. The physical life form, the species wants to stay alive, and the way that that has to happen is through procreation. So since eating, and finding food and shelter is probably the first, not probably, it's definitely the first priority. That's, even hunter-gatherers, that's what they're focused on. The second one is going to be to procreate. So it becomes this desire that cannot be overcome. Even, people who are homeless and sick and dying, they still procreate. They're starving to death, but it won't stop them from having sex and having kids. So that just gives you an idea that nature operates from a positive feedback. If it wasn't so much fun, we wouldn't do it. So the soul operates in the same way, in that the way that you know that you're operating from your soul desire is that the payoff, the carrot that is dangled in front of you, is joy and hope. These are the feelings that are associated. Now, that is not as easy as it sounds, because we have to deal with more than the soul. The soul is only one component. We have a soul that sits here in the middle, and just like in the myth about Balder, it is underneath the earth, meaning it's underneath the flesh. So the soul has to really shine brightly in order for it to take dominance. Otherwise, the human part is going to take over. So the soul incarnates into a human body, but the soul itself is not human. It is beyond that. What is fully human is your lower self. Lower self, as you know, is where the dwarves reside and are created. And the realm of the dwarves is in the southeast, and the southeast is the human door. And the human door has to do with emotions and the subconscious, which projects. It projects not only emotions, but intentions. And so one thing that The Secret has correctly is that, you know, you can manifest negative circumstances in your life by indulging in negative emotions. And let me be clear, in my experience, when we are indulging in negative emotions, it has to do with coming from a place of survival. When you're coming from a place of survival, it means that you are in fear. So I'm using all of these terms, and I'm trying as hard as I can to express them without any judgment, because this is the struggle. The whole point of all of this is that the soul is playing a video game, and it is trying to learn how to always operate from fearlessness. And so the more experienced, the idea is, the theory goes, the more experienced the soul is in operating from fearlessness, the more spiritually advanced the person will be. We talk about old souls. Well, it's probably true that the more experience a soul has incarnating, the more likely it is that that soul has learned over many lifetimes how to operate from the soul more often than not. And that those that are completely, totally dominated by the lower centers, where the dwarves are disconnected from the elves, where our lower self is disconnected from our higher self, and we're operating from purely physical, reptilian brainstem things, that could be an indication that that soul is less evolved. I remember years ago when I was going to counseling, and my brother, I've talked about my brother, a very, very abusive guy, and was very, he was 5 years older than me and twice my size, and he was very intimidating and abusive. And I remember there was something that he had done. I think the last time I had seen him, and he had threatened to pull a gun on me and shoot me or something like that. And it was just like, I don't know what this guy's problem is. And I was talking to a counselor about it, and I said, I don't know what I did to him. And the counselor said, you didn't do anything to him. And he said, souls have to come, this is his first time. And he used the term Neanderthal. Of course, I don't think Neanderthals were that way, but he said, sometimes you have Neanderthals that show up, and this might be his first time in human flesh. And that sort of kind of explained it, because he really operated like a 4-year-old. His entire way of looking at the world literally is like a 4-year-old. And I thought, that makes sense. And that sort of gave me the ability that it wasn't about me. It was that he's just really, really scared. This is his first time here, and this is too much for him. So I do believe that the more experienced a soul is in incarnating, the more likely that they will be more mature. And mature also means being fearless. Fearlessness and maturity go together. Having said that, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that it's possible that souls could have incarnated many, many times, and they still haven't learned the lesson. Because, this is, again, it's all about the actions that you take. the actions that you take have a direct effect on everything. So if you're stuck in a viral fear loop and things continue to stay worse, and it's difficult to get out of it, it's probably because you have been training yourself through your continuous actions, taking actions in fear, to continuously create that. And it creates like tracks in your brain, and it's hard to move out of those tracks. And every time you do something contrary to what your fear wants you to do, you lay a deeper track in your brain, and it becomes easier. But there will always be that temptation to do the easy one, which is operating from fear. So this is the dance. And I guess what I'm wanting to say in this video segment is that it is if you're having challenges with all of this, I want you to know that that's okay, that you're not different than anybody else. I mean, you hear me talk about students' unconscious resistance, and when they get to that place where they're about to make a big shift, that's usually when I lose them. And part of it is because they get to that place where they really are having a very difficult time knowing the difference between their fear-based emotions that are telling them you have to do this and this and this and this to survive, and their soul, which is saying no, let's jump off the cliff. And to be able to be in the middle of all of that raging storm, and still be able to take the fearless act, that's the hardest part. And it's not like you're going to be able to very easily prepare yourself. Because once you're there, what ends up happening is that you're in a totally unknown scenario for yourself, and you don't know. And, again, people say, I've got to go with my gut feeling. I hear this a lot. And their gut feeling is to walk away because they can't afford it. Another one is, I haven't been doing the work, so I don't want to waste my money and your time. And, the answer isn't to walk away. If you've spent all that money, then get something out of it. Start doing the work. If the problem is that you're not doing the work, do the work. But again, we can't see. We can't see beyond that. So to operate from the soul in that crisis moment is to really not know what's going to happen, that state of not knowing what the future holds. As I've shared with before, when I used to do psychic work, it was mostly women calling, wanting to know, either what their husband was doing or their boyfriend or the person that they're cheating with against, they want to know what this person is feeling and can I trust them? And so that's the big one is, can I trust him? And then I would ask, well, what is it that you would want in order to feel like you could trust them? And they'd say, well, I'd want to know that he's never going to betray me or cheat on me or whatever it is. And I would say, that's not trust. Trust is stepping out and taking that risk. Trust is taking that risk. And you don't know. And the thing about trust is they very well might betray you. You have no way of guaranteeing that they won't. So the idea that you have to have this sure thing before you're going to trust, it goes against the whole idea of trusting. What's inherent in the assumption of trust is that I'm going to choose to trust, knowing that somebody might betray that trust. And if they do betray that trust, the universe will still take care of me. Because that's what's really going on. When people are afraid to trust, they think that if whatever it is they're trusting in, whether it's the stock market or their husband or their wife, if that person or that institution violates their trust, they think that they won't survive. So trust says, I'm choosing to trust you even knowing that you might not hold up your end of the bargain. Now, that doesn't mean you do something stupid. I mean, stepping off of an actual cliff because you've arbitrarily decided that the universe is going to hold you up, that's just stupidity. That's not what we're talking about. Going into South Central LA wearing a Ku Klux Klan outfit with, a sheriff's badge and a gun, and a cowboy hat, and saying, I'm the new sheriff in town, that's not trusting, that's just stupid. So we're not talking about being stupid. But you will be having to ask yourself in those moments, is this stupid or not? And lots of times it will feel like you're about to jump off the cliff and do something really stupid. So that's the tough part. And so walking that fine line of having all of your feelings, because again, what we want to do is we want to stuff our feelings down. I was thinking about this today, and I'll try and make this brief. You guys know I've made this big move into a 2-bedroom home, and 3 blocks from the beach in a very in-demand, high-rent neighborhood, and this is really the first time in my life I by myself. I was married before and I did it with my ex-wife, but I by myself, having, what would be the normal scenario for a successful adult male. It's still in my mind. I still have that little kid who was programmed to believe that he'll never make it, that he doesn't deserve it, that you're a screw-up and you don't deserve to be successful or happy or, prosperous or anything like that. And of course, I've been continuously taking action against that feeling. And today I've been feeling angry. And it wasn't a real anger. This is what's interesting. I'd stop myself and I go, I'm really not angry right now. Why am I wanting to indulge in being angry? And it's because when I really listened to myself, it was because I was afraid I was going to get caught. I'm waiting for the phone to ring and somebody tell the landlord of this place saying, hey, I just looked at your finances. You can't afford that place. Or, the other landlord, as I'm moving out, calling me and, saying, you can't stop renting here, just really strange things. And when I got deeper than that, when I got beneath the anger, I found the fear. And then when I got beneath the fear, I found that there was a joy, that I'm really excited about this new phase of my life. And that being in the state of living in the state of my soul was in direct conflict to the energetic programming that was given to me as a little kid. And so I became afraid. So the fear was the direct result of me taking action and getting the results of those actions that would give me what my soul really wants. And I realized that the anger was a way of self-sabotage, especially when I said, I'm really not angry. Why am I wanting to be angry at drivers and, all that kind of stuff? And wanting to pick fights, somebody parked, they're doing some construction and somebody parked in front of my driveway, in front of my garage. And I wanted to just, go and find out and all it took was for me to say, hey, you can't park there. The guy wanted to kind of argue with me about it a little bit. And I said, listen, I'm sorry, this is my home. You're doing construction over there. You can't park in front of my garage, period. Sorry, you're going to have to move. And he did. But I still wanted to be angry about it. And I realized I'm not angry. I don't feel angry. I feel joy. Underneath the anger is fear. Underneath the fear is joy. So it's important that we be able to have that kind of consciousness. And that kind of consciousness doesn't come instantly, especially if you have a lot of trauma surrounding, growing up, and to me, things boil down to, of course, everybody's different. There are very specific things that go on, but if you boil it down to its basics, my experience is that parents have kids and they infect their kids with their fear-based stuff. And so, my father was extremely successful in his career, extremely successful. Not just financially, but I mean professionally, extremely successful. But he hated himself. And he would, he would just come home from work and just sit in the corner and drink, and this cloud would go around him, and he hated himself. And so he would project that onto his kids. And so, I've been infected with that. My brother and my sister both have been infected with that. The difference between me and my brother and my sister is that, since I was 18 or 19, I have been continuously taking action against those feelings. And I was taught how to do that. I didn't do that naturally. I, either was in 12-step programs or working with counselors or spiritual teachers that, I refused to be in that misery. And it was very, very, very challenging. So I want you to know, if you're coming into this teaching new and you're running into that, especially if you're running into the self-sabotage of creating, not being able to get out of the poverty or get out of the craziness or, all that kind of stuff. That's your lower self doing its best to try and protect you. And it has a false understanding of that. And to operate from the soul, here I'm finally trying to get to the truth of this, to the source of this. To operate from the soul means to be able to still yourself long enough to go, what is it that I really want? And then to go do it, despite all of the raging storm that's flying around you, of all of the feelings. And if you're able to, I encourage you to keep peeling back the layers to see what's really underneath it. Another good example is love, finding love, true love. If you have gone through any damaging stuff throughout your life, then you're pretty much guaranteed that when you find somebody who truly loves you, that after you go through the euphoria of meeting them and blah, 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 then what's going to happen is you're going to bump into a state of panic. And you're going to want to sabotage it. Because if especially you have not been taught by your parents that you are lovable, because that's one of the jobs of the parent, is to reflect back onto the child without any agenda. That means that they, ideally they don't have their agenda. Like my dad had his agenda. His agenda was that he hated himself. And so being that I was his son, he saw himself in me. And so he would project onto me that you're a loser, you can't accomplish anything, and all that kind of stuff. No matter how successful he got, it didn't take away that self-hatred of his. So he projected that onto me. Now, if whatever it is your parents' issue are, my mother was a little different. My mother couldn't stand the thought of being alone. So she was infusing into me and my brother and my sister that, we could never leave. And if we ever left, we wouldn't make it on our own. Now, they wouldn't say that verbally, but that was the energetic message. So if you are going to fall in love with somebody who truly is going to love you, nobody's perfect, but really be able to love you in an intimate way, then once you get past the euphoria and the projection in the beginning, then you're going to be in a panic mode because you will have to face all of the pain that is underneath being rejected by your parents. Because your parents represent true love, especially the mother represents true love. How well your mother honestly loved you is going to have a huge impact on your ability to receive love from others. If your mother wasn't very good at loving you unconditionally, without agenda, then when somebody does come along who does love you unconditionally and without agenda, then what's going to happen is you are then going to be forced to face all of the pain of that rejection. And what you're going to do is you're first going to project it onto that person, and you're going to want to sabotage the relationship. You're going to want to destroy things. And you're going to want to leave. Perfect example. I'll give you a great example. I got the best compliment I think anybody could give me. I'm on the Match.com or whatever, because I'm single now, and I'm experimenting with the idea of dating and seeing where that goes. And some woman liked my photo and clicked a like, and so you find out, oh, she liked my photo. So I looked at her profile, and she looked, kind of cool, and we had some things in common. So I reached out to her and I messaged her and I said, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. So we went back and forth on a couple of these, and I said, well, listen, if you're ever in my neck of the woods, come down and we'll have some tea. Here's my number. Right? She waited a couple of days, and then her response was, this is the most interesting thing I've ever seen. Her response was, I don't think I'm going to call or text because you genuinely seem at your best. What? So, I've been doing this long enough, I can tell what the unconscious message there is. The unconscious message is that she doesn't feel worthy of somebody who's at their best. Now, I couldn't let this go. I was, I wasn't personally hurt by that. It was actually a really great compliment, because it showed that even though, there's been some challenges, that whatever is coming across to people, it's coming across that I'm really at my best with myself and successful and all that other stuff, which is a tremendous compliment, which means obviously I would think that means I'm attractive to people. So I wrote her back and I said, thanks for letting me know. And I said, thank you for the compliment. I do feel good and strong in my life. And I said, I'm curious at your response, though, when you said that you're not going to call me because I'm at my best. I said, does that mean that you feel you would rather be with somebody who's not at their best because then they would need you? Is it because you don't think I have any space within me to need somebody else? And I said, I'm not judging. I'm just really curious if you'd be helping me a lot if you answered that question. And then she wrote back, and her response was self-deprecating. And she said, I feel like such an idiot. Of course I don't want somebody that's not at their best, and left it at that. And I wrote back and I said, thank you. I wasn't trying to criticize you. I said, but you haven't answered my question. Why is it that being at my best? And I said, listen, you saw my photo and you liked it, and then you responded to my emails. So there must have been something about me that you found initially attractive. So, but when it came down to, you actually picking up the phone and calling me, you changed your mind. So what was it that changed your mind? And again, the response that came back wasn't very coherent. The only thing is that, bottom line is she says she got hurt by her husband, and so that she, basically she's scared. But I think it's still, really, I think it's a really poignant example of when you are presented with what it is you truly want. If you have any of this programming that takes you out of your soul alignment, in order to make that, she would have, in her mind anyway, she doesn't know me. The truth is she doesn't know anything about me. She's only seen a profile and a few pictures. She doesn't know anything about me. I forgot what I was going to say. But when we're in that state, when we are about to get what it is we think we want, and we have to, she would then have had to, I guess was what I'm trying to say, she would have had to face within herself the reality that she didn't feel worthy of somebody who was at their best, that she didn't meet that. Now, she had an opportunity to change that for herself by taking action. If she had taken action and picked up the phone and called me, even though she was afraid, and even like gone out and met me, that in itself would have created a new track and she would have been sending a different message to the universe. Now, she would have had to go through all of her, self-criticism, because when I look back at the emails, there was a lot of self-deprecation. She was constantly comparing me to her and saying, oh, you've done more than I have, or I haven't done this. There's a lot of that going on. She would have to face that in order to be with me. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter how you feel. The only thing that matters is what you do. If she had decided to go, well, I know I feel unworthy, but I'm going to act as though I am. I'm going to stop self-criticizing and self-deprecating, and I'm going to act as though, and it's this simple. There's a phrase, fake it till you make it. There's some truth to that. It's not denial. You can be fully aware of all of your uncomfortable feelings. You just have to take action as though you were successful. And it's just that simple. So you can ask yourself, okay, what would a successful person do here? A successful person wouldn't start saying this, like deprecating themselves. They also wouldn't go the other route and start blowing themselves up as king of the universe. They would act as though they were comfortable with themselves and were able to look at themselves, but they were able to say, I like this and I want this, and they would take action in that way. What's interesting is if you do that, people treat you that's the way you are. If you act successful, people treat you that way. For instance, again with me, I could have very easily talked myself into staying where I was. I liked where I was, even though it was perfect location right on the beach and all that. It was very convenient. It wasn't very good for me in terms of being able to expand professionally. I was kind of limited. Now, it was a financial risk for me. The rent is more and all that kind of stuff. I could very easily have talked myself into staying. And I could have given myself all kinds of reasons. Well, it's cheaper and I can't afford it. And underneath it all, I would be going, and I don't really deserve that. But instead, I chose to go, you know what, my business is doing better and I want to upgrade even more. So I took action as though I deserved it. And everything so far has worked out. And it's just that simple. So I'm struggling trying to put this in a concise way, but operating from the soul does not mean that you have to feel good all the time. It doesn't mean that you deny your feelings. You straddle this tightrope where you acknowledge exactly how you're feeling. You try and peel the layers back to get past the protective shields of fear and anger or insecurity. Like that woman's shield was to say, I'm not good enough and I don't deserve it. That's her shield. You get past the shield, you're going to get to the soul, and you're going to find the soul is happy. And you can be in this state of, in the moment, being happy and joyful and excited and scared to death at the same time. You can have all of those feelings at the same time. You take action according to what the soul does. The soul says, I hope, I believe, I trust. And you take actions based on that. And then you do whatever you have to do with the feelings. You talk about them or whatever. Again, one of my favorite mantras comes from the tapping people. I don't know if that stuff works or not. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. But the mantra is genius. The mantra is, even though I have this feeling, I thoroughly and completely accept myself. Even though I have this feeling, I thoroughly and completely accept myself. So now I can wrap it up to the title of this, which is Operating from the Soul. The human door, which is the lower self. So to be human is the lower self. That's what human, what makes us human is the lower self. And the lower self is where the emotions are generated and created. One of the things I wanted to say is that a lot of people, the operating from the soul, you see here, the soul is is in this picture here has a green color. That comes from, I like that because normally when people think of the heart center, they think of red. But green is the color of the heart center according, I believe, to the Taoist tradition. It's actually green. Is it green? Which one? I can't remember which one is green. I can't remember if this the Hindu or it's the Taoist, but in any case. I wanted to put the green because the default understanding of the heart center people think is love. So they talk about love and operating from the heart, and I want to be a heart-centered person and all of that. And as wonderful as that sounds, in my experience, especially people who use that term all the time, you know, like I want to come from my heart and not my head. You know, people when they want to be passive aggressive with me, they'll say, you know, you should be more heart-centered, you know, that kind of thing. And these are usually people who are operating from tend and befriend. These are people who are people pleasers, who believe that operating from the heart center is making yourself into a doormat. And that's not what the heart center is. That is one of the, you know, in terms of the heart chakra, that is definitely one of the issues there. But the soul isn't about that. That is a human layer that goes above the soul. In the loving space all the time, always being loving, and always that, and then, yeah. These are usually people who are, in my experience, they're pushing down their own anger and their own resentment, and they feel guilty about all of the anger and the resentment that they have. So they cover it up with this pseudo syrupy, I love everything and everybody all the time. You know, and that's not what the soul is. The soul is joy and the soul is love, but the soul also sees the equality in everybody. This is why, you know, I am harsh with people. It's because I am not going to co-sign your fear-based victim mentality. And, you know, somebody who goes from the syrupy heart center, oh, that person, let's take that alcoholic, let's take that meth addict into our house and love them until they can love themselves. And, you know, the meth addict ends up stealing from you and going back on the street, you know, because that's what meth addicts do. Whereas for me, to operate from the heart center in love is to treat you as an equal. And whatever it is that I can do, you can do. And if I believe that the universe is infinite and has an infinite number of resources available to me, then it's available to you as well. If you take the action. The only thing that separates you from me is the actions that I take, if there is a difference. And if I can do it, you can do it. You get enough experience behind you, then you start to believe you can do it. And really the only thing a teacher does is shares from their experience. Do this and you'll get what I have. You want what I have, you got to do what I do. It's not about the feeling. It's not about the love, all that. So anyway, I've confused the hell out of myself. Hopefully I haven't confused you here. I'm trying to verbalize how to get to the soul and to understand that the soul is different from the lower self. And I guess this is I'll end with this. This is the difficult part. We get confused between our lower emotional responses to things and the soul's dedication to its purpose that it brought with it into manifestation. That's really what it comes down to. And you can't always figure out what's going on with your emotions. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between your lower self emotional dwarf response to the soul. Now, I forget the name of the myth, but there's a myth where in the Germanic mythology there are two brothers. One of them is called a dwarf. He turns into a dragon. His lust for gold turns him into a dragon. And he's called a dwarf. His brother is not a dwarf. His brother is a human, a man, meaning, a spiritually realized person, and they end up fighting. So he ends up killing the dragon. But understand that in the beginning of the myth, you can't tell them apart. They both look like human beings, which means that it is the dwarf aspect that we have that makes us human. What makes us man is acting from the soul. And so until we act from the soul, we're just dwarves. We're just, we're humans, but we're not man. And so to be man means to act from the soul. And so that is part, if not, the whole focus of this life is to learn the difference between what's going on in the dwarf nature and what's going on in the soul. And to learn how to have the soul be the king. Because the soul does represent the sun, which represents the king, represents royalty. And how to let the soul be in charge. I'll give you one last example before we stop for today. There's a Taoist teacher, can't remember his name, he's famous, he's written books and all that kind of stuff. He's a Taoist master, does all kinds of crazy things with energy. And he was teaching a seminar, and in the seminar he did something energetically, and he told people what was going to happen, whatever he called it. And people started doing all kinds of crazy things. They started laughing uncontrollably, or sobbing uncontrollably, or going into mudras, and their body would start moving, like they were possessed, or going into different, like mudras, or these kinds of things, or just shaking. And then he stopped it. And then everybody, and then he turned it around and did something else. And then somebody asked him and said, "What did you do?" And he said, I switched it so that the energy body sat in the place of the soul, and that the soul became secondary to the energy body. And the energy body started doing things it needed to do. It laughed, or it cried, or it shook, or it put itself into a mudra. So the energy body balanced itself. And then I switched it back so that the soul was in control of the body. And he said there are benefits to that because you can balance yourself energetically. But he said you should never let the soul be out of control, because then that's when you can become demon possessed. This is another reason why I tell people not to do plants, because you screw around with all that. Whenever you do spontaneous qigong, there's spontaneous qigong where that kind of stuff happens. When people pray in tongues, what's happened is that the soul is no longer in control of the body, and the energy body is now in control, and it does whatever it needs to do to balance. So unless you know what you're doing, then you end up getting caught up in the experience, because it's can be a very joyful and intense experience, having the body just do whatever. The energy body do whatever it wants to do. But again, that is the same kind of idea. What we need to do is to have the ability, if we chose to go, I'm out of balance, and let the energy body take over and balance itself. And then to be able to bring the soul back into control. But on a lesser level, when we're just dealing with emotions, to be able to know the difference between when we are operating purely from the dwarf nature that has cut itself off from higher awareness, which is when we're going to be in fear, when we're in anger, when we're feeling violent, or when we're feeling self-destructive. And when we want to act on that, that's when we're operating from the dwarf nature, the dragon nature. There's a reason why it was a dragon, because that's got the whole reptilian thing in it. When we're operating from that, or when we're operating from being a human. And externally, we won't be able to tell the difference, because you can't tell the difference between a dwarf and a human. They look exactly the same, because what you're looking at here is the dwarf aspect of me. The part of me that makes me mon is the soul. And when the soul, the higher self, and the lower self are all connected, then I am operating as a true mon, a true divine mind in the flesh. Until then, I'm just a dwarf. So we need to have that dwarf nature subordinate to the soul, and that only happens through taking action, sometimes in complete direct opposition to what our fears want us to do. So anyway, I'm going to shut up with that. I'm now just talking in circles. I think I'm just babbling, but hopefully you can get what it is I'm trying to say here. So in any case, my friends, that's it for me today for this one. Keep your eyes peeled and wish me a pleasant and a peaceful move. I still got to finish moving, and they're showing it, and it looks like crap now, so they're wanting to rush me to finish moving. Anyway, so that's it. I will stay in touch with you, and hopefully this weekend I'll do some more live Q&As. Okay. Until then, my friends, I look forward to seeing you next time.